This video is sponsored by World of Warships.
Поднимай над состав. Поднимаю. Начальника поднял. Так всех, весь офицерский состав, офицерский корпус поднимай.
When the Chernobyl reactor exploded, a toxic cloud of radiation spread across northeastern Europe, while the Soviet government scrambled to hide the truth from the world. Inside the USSR, leaders recognized the catastrophe and rushed thousands of specialists to confront it. Doctors, scientists, and helicopter crews stepped into the deadly zone, knowing every mission could be their last. Some became legends, many paid with their lives, but three men in particular faced the inferno without hesitation. On this episode of Forgotten History, we tell their story. Who were the Chernobyl liquidators? How were helicopters used? How were they effective? Who were these men?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
The Chernobyl liquidators were civilian and military personnel who responded to the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster and were actively operating on the site. These personnel are credited with limiting both the immediate and long-term damage from the disaster and saving many lives. Many were pilots. Pilots were needed to fly in the emergency teams, do surveys, place sensors, and evacuate civilians. The task was daunting. And ironically, despite the authoritarian nature of the Soviet regime, they asked for volunteers. One of these men was civilian Ukrainian pilot Mykola Mykolayovych Melnyk, born on December 17, 1953. He grew up in the town of Stavice in the Kiev Oblast. After the nuclear disaster, the military needed additional pilots to cover building openings with sandbags and lead slabs, install necessary equipment, commence aerial photography and atmospheric radioactive contamination monitoring. Melnik started flying missions into and out of the area on May 20th until he was reassigned. He volunteered to undertake the quick training exercise near Moscow, not even knowing what he was training for. Many pilots were evaluated, and Melnik was the best pilot. He would not know the purpose of the training for almost a week after completing the training. When he was briefed on what the mission was, he was also told of the risks involved to his personal safety. He volunteered anyway and flew to Kiev to prepare for the high-risk mission into the site to place radiation sensors on the reactor. What he had trained and volunteered for was the most critical mission called Operation Igla, or Operation Needle, on June 19, 1986.
For 250 years, the United States Navy has stood watch over freedom across the seas, from wooden decks and cannon smoke to steel hulls and nuclear power. Now, that legacy comes alive in World of Warships' 250th anniversary event. It's called Liberty Harbor, a new interactive base you build through every mission and expedition. Each upgrade unlocks new rewards, historic ships, and stories told through the eyes of your father, a former U.S. naval officer, as you carry on his legacy. As you expand the harbor, you'll unlock brand new epic Tier 8 premium cruiser, Bridgeport, along with premium time, containers, and exclusive Navy-themed cosmetics. Whether you're a returning commander or a new recruit, there's never been a better time to take the helm. World of Warships delivers stunning realism, over 40 unique maps, and hundreds of ships from destroyers to carriers, each with its own story to tell. The game is free to play on PC, so join now using this link and use the code STEPUP250 to claim your free American Tier 3 cruiser, St. Louis, 20 days of premium, a commander, and more, all for new players. Your mission begins in Liberty Harbor. Build it, command it, earn your place in history.
The mission was to fly his Kamov helicopter into the reactor site and install a large, almost 60-foot-long radiation probe vertically into a slot on top of the building, basically threading a needle, which required dangerous precision flying. The first attempt to insert the needle into the actual reactor was foiled by a frozen crust above the target, which had to be cleared. The second attempt was also unsuccessful due to extremely high crosswinds, but Melnik succeeded on the third attempt. He then flew a total of 46 sorties into the radiation cloud, flying liquidators in and out as they rotated due to the radiation. He also flew injured civilians out of the area and dropped them at hospitals. In all, he logged a combined total of 52 flying hours. In all, more than 100,000 people were evacuated and a 20-mile exclusion zone was established that still exists today. It is not certain how many people Melnik saved personally, but many were children who survived the initial exposure and would be treated for radiation poisoning. In 1990, as part of its Salute to Excellence Awards program, the Helicopter Association International honored Melnik with its Igor I. Sikorsky Award for humanitarian service. According to the Remembrance Book by the Chernobyl Museum, Melnik participated in the Liquidator operations from May 20, 1986 until September 9, 1986, and he had a lot of radiation exposure. For his bravery, Melnik was awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union by decree of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR for his courage, heroism, and self-sacrifice displayed during liquidation of the Chernobyl NPP accident consequences. He also received the Soviet Order of Lenin and Gold Star Medal. Melnik had humble beginnings. Upon his school graduation, Melnik worked as a sports coach and later as a telephone station technician in Stavice, later moving to Zaporizhia for a construction job. From 1972 to 1974, he served his conscript service in the Soviet Armed Forces. In 1979, Melnik graduated from the Civil Aviation Pilot School in Kremenchuk and started work as a civilian helicopter pilot. Later, he continued his education at the Kremenchuk Department of the Kharkiv Polytechnic Institute and the Civil Aviation Academy in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. Upon his return from the Chernobyl mission, Melnik continued his work as a test pilot at the Kamov Helicopter Testing Center in Feodosia until 1992, when his health began to get worse. In 1994, he underwent 2 surgeries and chemotherapy related to cancer attributed to his radiation exposure. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Melnik co-founded a cargo airline company in Kiev operating Antonov AN-24 air transports and Kamov helicopters as a subcontractor for the American-owned companies DHL and United Parcel Service. Due to lack of actual helicopter work, he accepted an offer from Spain. In 1995, Spanish airline Helicópteros del Sureste approached Melnik for help with purchasing Soviet-made helicopters, as there were many available. Melnik accepted the job and moved to Alicante, Spain, where he worked as an instructor pilot in Soviet-designed helicopters. He trained at least 25 local pilots and worked in aerial firefighting. By 2006, Melnik had recorded 13,400 recorded flying hours. But his health continued to deteriorate, which did not allow him to fly, and he was hospitalized with post-radiation-related illnesses. Melnik died in Spain on July 26, 2013. Another helicopter pilot with an equally impressive record of heroic action was General Nikolai Antoshkin. Full disclosure, I, your humble narrator, had the privilege to meet and speak with Antoshkin in October 1988 in Germany, just 1 month after he retired, and he was an impressive man. Antoshkin was born on December 19, 1942, in the village of Kuzminovka in Bashkortostan. Antoshkin entered the Red Army in August 1961 and was sent to Orenburg Higher Military Aviation School for pilots, graduating in 1965. Antoshkin was promoted to lieutenant on October 29, 1965, and served with reconnaissance aviation units. He was promoted to captain on December 30, 1969, and graduated from the Gagarin Air Force Academy in 1973 and promoted to major on June 29. He rose through the ranks and became commander of the Air Force of the 20th Guards Army in May 1980. After graduation from the Military Academy of the General Staff, Antoshkin became commander of the Air Force and deputy commander of the Central Group of Forces. In March 1985, Antoshkin became Chief of Staff of the Air Forces of the Kiev Military District. On April 29, he was promoted to Brigadier General. Being the air commander for the region during the Chernobyl disaster, he took charge immediately after the disaster and did a flyby of the damaged plant on April 26. Antoshkin organized, commanded, and flew a fleet of 100 helicopters in an operation to seal off the number 4 reactor. Flying into the Chernobyl power station just outside the town of Pripyat in Ukraine, following the huge power surge, Antoshkin said he felt a tickle in his throat and had the overwhelming urge to vomit. The missions his men flew were to smother the exposed core of the reactor with sand, boron, and other materials, and these flights continued until May 5th, when the fire was contained. Although one of the helicopters crashed after hitting a crane, the airdrops were successful. The operation took around 2 weeks, with General Antoshkin and the other pilots exposed to beams of radiation and smoke emanating from the reactor. Antoshkin himself dropped around 5,000 tons of material over the course of those 2 weeks to extinguish the raging fire and contain the radiation. He also flew out 2 reactor employees who were killed and 134 others who were hospitalized with acute radiation poisoning. But then, getting the civilians who had been located out was the next mission. Of these people he rescued from the reactor, 28 died and another 14 succumbed to suspected radiation-induced cancer in the years that followed. Air crews were sent in again to try to deal with the exposed reactor after fire crews who had been sent on the ground became ill with acute radiation sickness. Then came the flights to get most of the civilians out. By the end of the operation, they had extracted tens of thousands of people. In all, 100,000 people would be evacuated by air and by land. However, when it was over, the helicopters were so radioactive that they were abandoned, with some later being buried. Antoshkin was awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union, Order of Lenin, Order for Merit to the Fatherland, 4th Class, and Order for Service to the Homeland in the Armed Forces of the USSR, 2nd Class. Later, he was commander of the Air Force of the Central Asian Military District at Almaty, commander of the Air Force of the Moscow Military District, and then Russian Air Force Frontal Aviation. Antoshkin retired in September 1998 as a colonel general, or a 4-star, and commander of the Air Force for combat training, and later being the commander. In 2014, he became a member of the Russian Duma, or Parliament. Antoshkin died of COVID-19 in Russia on January 20, 2021, at age 78. He was buried in the Federal Military Memorial Cemetery in Mytishchi. Another hero pilot called into action was Mykola Volkozub, born in 1932. Like the others, he was told of the risks. "I had been preparing," he said. "It was a very in-depth preparation process. I did all the calculations for the helicopter, its weight, etc. Interactions among crew members were also very well planned." Volkozub wore a heavy lead vest that made walking difficult to protect himself from the radiation. After making 3 flights that lasted for 19 minutes, 40 seconds in total, to measure the temperature and composition of gases inside, he became nauseated. Despite the protections, he was nonetheless exposed to such a high dose of radiation that some dosimeters went haywire when he tried to measure his exposure. The new Mi-8 helicopter he made the flights in, which was fitted with special lead plates on the floor, was also exposed to intense radiation. It was later abandoned at a cemetery for irradiated equipment, having made only 3 flights. "I heard how they discussed the question, 'What shall we do? What shall we do?'" Nuclear scientist Valery Alexeyevich Legasov said measures had to be urgently taken in order to cover the area to prevent the emission of radiation. Some people may say they have no fear, but nobody is not afraid. The only thing is that people perceive fear differently. One person is frozen by fear, another driven by it. I had to do it. I knew it was dangerous. He was awarded a Hero of Ukraine medal for his bravery. Volkozub, who at age 86 still supervised test pilots who worked for Antonov in 2018, and said he was calm and calculating at the time despite his fear. The final death toll of those killed by radiation-related illnesses such as cancer is subject to debate. 33 years after the event, Volkozub visited the site again for the first time since his flights and said he couldn't recognize it. He said, "It has nothing in common with how it was in the past. It was devastated. It was totally devastated. There was a pipe jutting into the sky, and some parts of the reactor were simply hanging." Today, the reactor is covered by a massive confinement shelter that was built to cover an aging sarcophagus designed to stop radiation leaking out. As he strolled through Pripyat, an abandoned town where the nuclear power plant's workers once lived, Volkozub recalled being present at the first session of an emergency commission collecting rescuers and mitigators. Today, Chernobyl remains frozen in time, an empty city, a silent reactor sealed beneath steel and concrete, and a wasteland that may never again be a home. Yet, within that silence lies the echo of the men who flew into the inferno knowing the price they would pay. Many liquidators were praised as heroes by the Soviet government and press, while others struggled for years to have their service recognized. Those surviving liquidators today receive significant social benefits for their veteran status. Many of those still living, rescuers, heroes, workers, and locals, still deal with the health effects from the Chernobyl disaster. And many more would have died had it not been for these brave men and those like them. The world remembers Chernobyl as a disaster, but it should also be remembered as a place where ordinary pilots, soldiers, and workers stood against the unthinkable. Their courage bought the future at the cost of their own.
Вертолетчики нашли способ действий своих очень такой эффективный, что ли, расположив наблюдательный пункт на крыше здания райкома партии в городе Припять. Оттуда они наводили на цель экипажи, которые находились над 4-м блоком. Я должен сказать, что эта работа, в общем-то, была небезопасной, потому что нужно было зависеть, сбросить большую тяжесть, уйти вовремя, не получив избыточных доз излучения, и главное попасть в цель. Вот все это было отработано.
Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.